Welcome to ASAP online classes for our students. ഇന്നത്തെ ക്ലാസ് MA എക്കണോമിക്സ് സ്റ്റുഡൻസിന് വേണ്ടിയിട്ടുള്ളതാണ്. ടോപ്പിക്കിന്റെ പേര് ഇൻട്രൊഡക്ഷൻ ടു എൻവയോൺമെന്റൽ എക്കണോമിക്സ് ആൻഡ് എൻവയോൺമെന്റൽ വാല്യുവേഷൻ. സെമസ്റ്റർ 2-ലെ എക്കണോമിക്സ് ഓഫ് സോഷ്യൽ സെക്ടർ ആൻഡ് എൻവയോൺമെന്റ് എന്ന പേപ്പറിലെ ഒരു ടോപ്പിക്കാണ്. For taking this session, we have Dr. Anita V. Madam, Professor and Head of the Department of Economics, University of Kerala. So, all participants name, ma'am name, in session like welcome cheyna. Ma'am, you may please start.
Good morning to all and all. Thank you, Chinju, for the introduction. First of all, I would like to thank HASAP for giving me this opportunity. As mentioned, the topic of discussion is Introduction to Environmental Economics and Economic Valuation. Start with the definition of environmental economics. There are a lot of definitions available related to environmental economics. Different economists define in different way. I would like to quote the definition used by Encyclopedia Britannica. That is, this the subdiscipline of economics, its value that applies the values and tools of mainstream micro and macro economics to allocate environmental resources more efficiently. Before going to go deep into the definition and concept, think about the question why we study environmental economics. Means we study, that means the students of economics study environmental economics. See, we know that people from different discipline, from particularly from pure science, we have an environmental science department, and other science department also focus on studies related to environment. Then why people from economics use the concept environmental economics? See, the answer is that in pure science or the environmental science, and in the maybe in the physical science or chemistry, they do not concentrate on the relationship between or the interaction between environment and the human being. So that gap, in order to fill that gap, under the economics discipline, we focus on the environmental economics. So conventionally, we use the basic tools of micro and macro economics to establish the environmental economics or to develop policies. Again, the two peculiarity of the environmental economics is that one is interdisciplinary in nature and another one is transdisciplinary in nature. So what do you mean by interdisciplinary? Means in order to prove the concepts and to develop theories in environmental economics, we use resources from other disciplines of social science. That means we use political ideologies, views of social scientists, etc. So in that sense, we can say that environmental economics is an interdisciplinary, the approach or the discipline is an interdisciplinary one. At the same time, it is a transdisciplinary one because we use elements or the concepts or data from other disciplines. Maybe it's a pure engineering background or the physical science or the results of chemistry like that. So in that sense, we can say that it is a transdisciplinary method. So in order to link the relationship between environment and human beings, we study environmental economics and we use the principles of economics to establish the environmental concepts. So what is the scope of environmental economics? See, if we answer the question why we need a separate course on environmental economics, then we can understand the scope of environmental economics. Why we need a separate course means have different courses like microeconomics, macroeconomics, development economics, public economics, like that. But again, we create a separate course on environmental economics or environment and social sector economics, like that. See, from the definition itself, we say that we use the basic concept of micro and macroeconomics to establish environmental economics. But if we apply the basic concepts of micro and macro principles in environmental economics, we can't prove the current environmental situations or current human relationship between human being and environment. For example, suppose if we consider the analysis in microeconomics, simply analyze how the equilibrium is determined or how the price is determined, we can say that, for example, in the case of market for bread or market for apple, how the price of apple or price of bread is fixed in based on the microeconomic principle. So we consider the basic principles like supply and demand, and based on the interaction between supply and demand, we fix the price of apple or price of bread. My question is, can we fix the price of natural resources or the commodities related to natural resources, or we can say the word natural capital? Can we fix the price of natural capital in the same way we fix the price in the price of bread or apple? For example, in the case of bread, we know that the conventional demand curve is downward sloping. When the price of bread increases, the demand decreases. When the price of, in other words, when again the demand, based on the demand also we can determine the price. So can we determine the price of air quality or water quality or the quantity of air? Can we fix it in the same way? How we determine the demand for air or how we determine the supply of air? In that sense, we can't fix the price of natural resources in the same way we fix the usual commodities. So we need a separate, we can use the same principles of microeconomics, but we consider it in different way, or we should consider different aspects of natural resources. That's why we create separate course on environmental economics. In the same way, the market, there are macroeconomic background for environmental economics, but the conventional macroeconomic principles, we can't use the conventional macroeconomic principles in the environmental economics. That will be clear on the next slides onwards. So the conclusion is that the traditional is unable to explain how the environment works. All these are based on the principles of scarcity, but still we can't explain or we can't place the environmental economics in the conventional microeconomic framework. Then another major scope or importance of environmental economics is, in order to make effective policies. So why we say effective policies, or which are the effective policies in order to manage the whole system in a fair manner or justifiable manner, then we can say that that policy is an effective one. So in order to make an effective policy, we understand the basic economic principles in the environmental framework. So we have concerns related to economic, social and environmental aspects, but usually in the conventional theories, we neglect these aspects, or most of the we do not bother about balance among these principles. So another thing is that, again, there is a trade-off between value of environmental goods and the value of environmental goods. So in order to make the value of environmental goods, or in terms of price, we should focus on the environmental economics. Again, environmental goods or the natural resources are, the changes in the natural resources are uncertain, unknowable. So this uncertainty or the unknowable characteristics of the natural resources again demands the environmental economics. So all these aspects will clear while I explain other slides or other concepts. So let us move to the conventional macroeconomic principle or the conventional basic models of macroeconomic principle. We know that the standard model is the circular flow model. We have only two aspects, that means households and firms. Households supply land, labor, and capital to firms, and the finished goods are moved from firms to households. So the return movements are payment for goods and services from households to firms, and another one is the wages, rents, interest, and profits from firms to households. This is the traditional conventional macro model. So what is the role of natural resources in this conventional model? We have one term, land, in the movement from households to firm, that is land, labor, and capital. But that land consider only a single element of natural resources. Again, that concept of land is treated in the conventional manner. So that means this conventional model or this standard circular flow model is not work in the current context. In order to incorporate natural resource component, maybe we can replace this land concept to the natural resource concept. So we can, from the this circular flow model, maybe we can say that land can be converted to natural resources. So natural resources, labor, and capital. So when we incorporate the concept of natural resources in this circular flow model, how it works? So let's move to the modern concepts or the interlinkage between economy and the environment. In order to overcome that natural resource concepts or the exclusion of natural resources, we can move to the this picture. Here, basic model is there, that is the firms and households, that is there. The interlinkage between economy and the environment shows that the system is only a subsystem of the whole planetary boundary. That means the economic system is embedded in the environmental system, and whole thing or the whole transactions in the environmental system determined by the whole transactions in the economic system is determined by the environmental system, that is the planetary boundary. So in your syllabus, they show it as the material balance model. So how we can say that it is a material balance model? In the previous circular flow model, there are a lot of leakages in the two-way model. So in order to overcome or in order to close that leakages, here there is the planetary boundary, and the one form of energy is converted from to the production of goods and services, and at the end it moves to the waste form or the heat form. The whole planetary, including the whole planetary, that means the ecological system, the environmental system, economic system, and the whole system, we can call it as the biosphere. In the biosphere, all type of ecological cycles and the waste formations are all created in the biosphere, including the planetary boundaries, and all the waste are reached outside the model. So in order to explain this concept of ecological system or the environmental system, we use the concept of principles of thermodynamics. There are two laws related to the thermodynamics. The first law is stated that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. If we apply the system in the environment material balance model, it is clear that in order to function the whole ecological system or the economic system, we absorb the energy from solar or sun, and the whole process is taking place within the planetary boundary, and again within the as a subsystem of ecological system. And after the whole process, the waste is formed or waste is created. That means there is one form of material to another form of material. In simple way, we can say that we use natural resources to produce goods and services. And that goods and services, after the production of goods and services, it leaves the byproducts waste and the finished products. So there is the natural resources, one form of material. That material is transformed through the production process to another form of material, that is waste. So that's the first law of thermodynamics. The second law states that the law of entropy. So in economics, we always stated that try to focus on the equilibrium of the whole thing. But in the case of natural resources or in the environmental economics principle, everything is in the form of disequilibrium. For example, the law of entropy is used by physical scientists to explain the disorder. So in our how we can incorporate the law of entropy in the context of economics, for example, or in the case of environmental economics, for example, in the case of coal. So when the coal is formed, coal is treated in the natural resources, or coal is treated as itself, the disorder is very less, or the entropy is very less. That means when the coal is moved from, the process is moved from coal to energy, the disorder, the less entropy, it moves from less entropy to high entropy. That means the less disorder to high disorder. How it happens means when the transformation taking place, the coal converts the whole thing into heat, energy, carbon dioxide, etc. So when it keeps in the initial form of coal, it compress the whole thing into less disorder form. So when an economic activity taking place, in the case of natural resources, less equilibrium to less disorder, a movement from less disorder to high disorder. So how can we solve this less disorder form, the movement from less disorder to high disorder form? So that is the huge, in the form of huge waste or some form of environmental disorders. So how can we solve this problem? That is the question of, again, the question of environmental economists. So there are a lot of solutions for this. In simple form, we can say that in the conventional production function approach, we have output. Output is a function of labor and capital. So in order to incorporate the environmental economics component or this natural resource disequilibrium, we should incorporate the natural resources component. That means the new equation is output is a function of land, capital. That capital is the man-made capital, and one more component, that is the natural capital. So output is a function of output is a function of labor, man-made capital, and natural capital. So by incorporating the component of natural capital in the conventional production function equation, we can solve the issues of disorder to some extent. there are a lot of solutions for this, particularly provided by the ecological economics. So what is the idea of ecological economics? Ecological economics is a branch of economics that explicitly recognizes environmental limits and interactions between human activities and environment. This tried to understand the ecological process, system, causes, and effects in addressing economic and environmental problems. So there is one more concept emerged here, that is environmental economics versus ecological economics. So what is the difference between these two? So in the case of under the economics discipline, we can classify it in the following way. That is, in the environmental economics, we use the principles of neoclassical economics or mainstream economics, whereas in the ecological economics, their principles or approaches are very pluralistic in nature. So there is a trade-off between, or there is environmental economics versus ecological economics. Again, the ideas of ecology, if we go through the ideas of ecological economics, we can see that we can solve most of the problems related to, or we can keep less disorder related to the production function approaches or the current production function approach. So how can we, the idea is that the ecological economists believe that we can't substitute man-made capital with the natural capital. That means we should protect the natural capital in a sustainable way. But the environmental economists or the neoclassical principles, they argue that we can substitute man-made capital for the natural capital. So we can extract the natural capital in an efficient way, and we can use the whole natural capital for the production, for the maximum production of a particular commodity, or their concept of efficient allocation is in such a manner. But the ecological economists, they try to use the minimum resources, and at the same time they try to protect the natural resources in different ways. So these are the basic concepts or basic ideas related differentiation between environmental economics and ecological economics. And under the ecological economics principle, they consider the whole environmental system as a single unit, and they treat the whole sustainable model in such a manner that economy is embedded in the ecological system. So before going to the valuation of environment, I think if you can raise questions, then ask questions now.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
Ma'am, നമുക്ക് രണ്ട് questions post ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട് participants. One from Vinayakan XB. Could you please also explain about Doughnut economic model for environment aspects?
Doughnut economic model, okay. So, see, there are different models for explaining economic model. Earlier, they used the Mickey Mouse model, the conventional Mickey Mouse model. In the conventional Mickey Mouse model, the environment and society are only a subsystem or a part of environment, and the society are outside the economic system. It looks like the Mickey Mouse. But the Doughnut model, it consider, I think it's almost like the this type of model. It consider the material transformation from one form to another, that is the input which includes natural resources. It moves through the production process, then it reaches to the form of waste. That means the input transforms through the economic process and it leads to the pollution or the waste form. So this in the case of Doughnut, it consider the input as well as the output, that is the waste. So compared to the conventional Mickey Mouse model or other sustainable or mainstream model, I think it is better to use the Doughnut model for the environmental analysis.
Next question, Gautam ആണ് ചോദിച്ചിരിക്കുന്നത്. Can you please suggest some good books to study environmental economics?
So, see, you can use the books written by Kolstad. It is a basic books for reference. Then other books are, I have used the Tietenberg's natural resource, Tietenberg's books on natural resource economics. And there is another books by Ahmad M. Hassan, Principles of Economics. I think you can download the PDF version of the Ahmad Hassan and the Tietenberg's Natural Resources, a freely downloadable version. And you can also Kolstad. Then if you want to study in a higher level, the higher level theories for like contingent valuation or theories related to tradable pollution permits, you can refer the book Hanley. But it is not available in PDF manner in a free version.
Okay, ma'am. രണ്ട് questions ആയിരുന്നു. നമ്മുടെ session കഴിഞ്ഞു.
Okay. So let's topic of valuation of environment. This is the second part of our topic. So the question here is why we value natural environment, or humans place an economic value on the environment. I have already mentioned that the valuation of or the pricing of natural commodities are different from the pricing of commodities. So there are controversial opinions or arguments arises related to the valuation of natural resources. Some argue that we value the natural resources only to improve the human welfare, and some others argue that it is maximize human the needs. That means particularly the selfish needs. The human welfare approach, again, they extended some. Again, there are views related perceptions related to human welfare approach. They argue that it's solely for the valuation is solely used for the welfare to improve the welfare aspects. But there are others argue that do not value the environmental resources. How assess the magnitude of damage? So in order to measure the damage of a particular system, we need environmental valuation or valuation techniques. For example, to know the value of or the cost related to spillover of oil. So in order to measure the damage created by the spillover of oil, we should focus on the value of natural resources. So here arise the two concepts: stock of natural resources and the value of natural resources. In the case of stock of resources, we use the concept accounting. Most of the time, it is very, compared to valuation techniques, it is very easy to account or to calculate the stock of resources. So, for example, the number of trees in the forest is the stock of resources. Again, the stock of coal or the oil resources, or the quantity, the total quantity of oil resources, like that. Again, in the modern context, some studies use the GPS system to measure the stock of resources. So, counting or calculating the quantity of the resources and the value of the resources are entirely different. calculating stock is comparatively better to the valuation techniques. So the question is whether we need the valuation of environment or not, in order to assess the magnitude of damage, or in order to know the availability of the resources or the quality of the resources, we should know valuation techniques. So sometimes for the case of economists or economists use sometimes they try to value in terms of price, but this is not the ultimate aim. So our ultimate aim, particularly in the case of ecological economists, the ultimate aim of valuation is to know the quality of the natural resources and its effects on the economic activity. So let's move to the types of valuation. What is the basis of valuation? Generally, economists decomposes the concepts of valuation into three major categories. That is use value, option value, and the non-use value. Direct use of the environmental resources are considered for the valuation. For example, fish harvested from the sea, timber harvested from the forest, scenic beauty conferred by the natural vista are considered. Here we consider only the direct use of the particular resources or the value derived from the direct use. The second one is the option value. Here the value people place on a future ability to use the environment. It reflects the willingness to pay to preserve the option to use the environment in the future if one is not using it, even if one is not currently using it. For example, maybe some people are willing to pay for preserving particular resources for future use. Then comes the non-use value. In the case of non-use value, people are willing to pay for improving or preserving resources that we will never use. So that concept is the non-use value. Again, the non-use value is classified into two: bequest value and existence value. The bequest value, the users, they concern about the future generation. So in order to protect a particular resources for their children or future generation, they are willing to provide a particular amount. So we call it as bequest value. Again, another category of non-use value is the existence value. In the existence value, people are concerned about species. So in order to protect endangered species, they willing to provide a particular price or value. So that's the existence value. So how can we calculate the total willingness to pay? The total willingness to pay for a particular natural resource is use value plus option value plus non-use value. That is the total willingness to pay. So what are the different methods of valuation? I have already told that the ultimate objective is to find the willingness to pay of a particular individual. Or the ultimate objective of the valuation is to find the height of the demand curve. Mainly, there are different approaches to value the height of the demand curve or the willingness to pay. Mainly, that valuation can be classified into direct method and indirect methods. The direct methods is also called stated preference method. The basic model, popularly accepted model, is contingent valuation method. Not the popularly accepted, it's the widely practiced model, or the highly used model is the contingent valuation method. Another method is the indirect method. That is the revealed preference method. So the indirect methods or revealed preference method, the best examples are travel cost method, hedonic property pricing method, that is also called hedonic pricing method, preventive expenditure method, etc. So I don't know how to complete the whole thing. Let's start with the direct method, that is the stated preference method and the contingent valuation method. In the contingent valuation method, why we call it as direct method or stated preference method, we directly ask the particular individual their preference about the particular environment. This contingent valuation method is also called hypothetical market. Why we call it as hypothetical market? Because we created a hypothetical situation or an imaginary situation to value, to know the willingness to pay of a particular individual. For example, suppose we want to know the value people willing to pay for the improvement of a particular park. So after the condition of the particular park, so maybe it's a children's park or a beach park, how people value an improvement. So in order to know that particular situation before the actual maintenance, before starting the actual maintenance, we can evaluate that concept or the change based on the contingent valuation method. This concept is introduced by Davis in 1960s, and later in 1970s it is widely used. There are 5 methods, or this contingent valuation method is purely based on the survey method. So the basic principle starts with the survey aspects, the questionnaire, the development of the questionnaire, the development of hypothetical situations, etc. So the first stage or the first phase of the contingent valuation method is to develop a hypothetical market. So based on that hypothetical market, we can go for steps, or we can calculate the willingness to pay and the average willingness to pay. So the there are 5 stages in the contingent valuation method. The first stage is the development of hypothetical market. For example, I would like to explain a study conducted by the Department of Economics under the financial support of the Inter-Universities Center for Alternative Economics to value the improvement of the Pamba River. For that, we created a hypothetical situation. This year onwards, or the next year onwards, the government is we are investing a huge amount. The government is investing a huge amount to improve the Pamba River, the quality of the water, etc. So, if that is the condition, how much is the willingness to pay of the visitors, that is the tourist. So first we create the hypothetical market. Second, we can collect the willingness to pay in different manner. As a form of bidding game, we can collect the willingness to pay. Bidding game means we provide higher and higher levels of values. From the higher and higher values, the respondents can choose a particular value. That's the bidding game method. When we reach the maximum willingness to pay, we stop the question. At the same time, we can also use flashcard method. The flashcard method, we show different values or different prices From the flashcard, the respondent can choose a particular value. Again, another method is we can use yes or no questions, whether the respondent is willing to pay for the particular improvement or not. So in that case, we provide yes or no questions. We can also use another method, that is the open-ended questions. We do not provide any options or any choices. We just give only an open-ended questions like that. What is the maximum amount you are willing to pay for such an improvement, or what is the minimum amount you are willing to pay for particular improvement? So from these 5 different options, we can, through these 5 different options, we can the willingness to pay, whether it is maximum, maybe usually we collect the maximum willingness to pay for the improvement of particular environment. So collecting the data, the main objective is to calculate the maximum willingness to pay and the average willingness to pay. So estimating the average willingness to pay is the another method. After estimating the average willingness to pay, we try to develop the demand function or the demand curve. So these are the steps in constructing or stages of constructing or developing contingent valuation method. So first we start with the hypothetical market, then we collect data related to the maximum willingness to pay. Then from that we estimate the average willingness to pay. Then we move for the development of the demand. So from the advantages of this method is that willingness to pay, usually willingness to pay is a function of different variables. We can say that maybe willingness to pay maybe depends on the income of the respondent, age of the respondent, social status of the respondent, education, maybe his or her ability to protect the natural resources or concern of natural resources like that. So willingness to pay is a function of different socioeconomic variables and other satisfaction related variables. So in that way, we can develop that demand function. So willingness to pay is treated as the demand. So willingness to pay is equal to, is a function of all these independent variables. So in that way, we can reach the conclusion. So which are the factors influencing the higher willingness to pay, and which are the factors influencing the low willingness to pay, like that. But the difficulties associated with, or the shortcomings associated with the contingent valuation method is that I've already mentioned that it is purely based on the survey method, and the investigator or the researcher develop the whole aspects related to the contingent valuation method in a particular context. There are standard tools are available, but still to implement that tool in a particular context, the researcher should focus on the local characteristics or the contextual based characteristics. So while developing, the first difficulty is that while developing the hypothetical market, there arise some form of, if researcher or the investigator is not familiar with the particular context, there arise the starting point, starting level, or the information biases, starting level biases, etc. So if the hypothetical market or the hypothetical situation developed is not clear, the whole survey is not reached with the particular conclusion. There is the problem of information biases, and at the same time there are problems related to multi-collinearity. In the case of independent variable, there may be collinearity between independent variables. Maybe we can remove that type of issues by using standard statistical techniques. There are such problems exists in the case of contingent valuation methods. So if you have any doubts related to contingent valuation method, please ask.
Hello, ma'am. Deepika, ഒരു ഡൗട്ട് പോസ്റ്റ് ചെയ്തിട്ടുണ്ട്. Like, can you please explain indirect methods again?
Indirect method?
ഒന്നുകൂടി പറയാമോ?
Okay, okay. The next part is the indirect method. I will explain it deeply. The indirect method. So the indirect method, in the direct method we call it as stated preference method. That's the hypothetical situation. But in the indirect method we call it as a revealed preference method. We use the actual value of the particular preference or the particular use of the situation. There are different tools or the theoretical valuation methods, that is the travel cost method, hedonic property pricing method, preventive expenditure methods, etc. I think it is best to explain hedonic pricing method. So in the hedonic pricing method is the revealed preference method. It is also called property pricing method. The idea is that in the hedonic pricing method, or for example, consider the case of a plot or a house. In order to value that price of a plot or a house, we consider a bunch of factors or bunch of characteristics. So think about the situation. If you want to purchase a house, what are the characteristics or what are the peculiarities we judge before purchasing that particular plot or particular house? There are a lot of factors. The general characteristics are, maybe in the case of a house, the square feet of the house, the location of the house, like that. So based on the hedonic property pricing principle, when we evaluate or when we purchase a particular commodity, here the commodity, here the item is household or house. If we consider at least one or more variable, if one or more variable is related to environmental factors, then we can call it as a hedonic property pricing method. For example, there are site specific characteristics. That is, in the case of a house, the area, that is the square feet of the house, number of rooms in the house, etc. are the site specific characteristics. Maybe location, distance from that particular house to school, market, colleges, or main road, etc. So if we consider the scenic beauty of the particular place, or the environmental characteristics like air pollution or water quality, etc., then we can call it as if we incorporate that variables, then we can call it as the hedonic property pricing method. So what is the difference between contingent valuation method and revealed preference method? In the hedonic property pricing method or revealed preference method, we collect data. Here also we apply survey method, but here we collect the data in the case of actually purchased cases. We approach people who are purchased properties, and we collect data related to environmental related variables and other related variables, and the actual price paid by the particular individual for that house. All these are collected. So the difference between the stated preference and revealed preference. The revealed preference, we collect the actual data, but in the case of stated preference, we hypothetically we created a hypothetical situation, and based on that imagination or based on that hypothetical situation, the individual or the respondent give a value or the willingness to pay. But in the case of revealed preference, we actually collected data based on the actual transactions. So compared to contingent valuation or the stated preference method, revealed preference is more reliable. But again, the difference is that in the case of revealed preference, if we move to the use value, non-use value approaches, in the case of revealed preference, we collect the use value method. While in the case of contingent value or the stated preference method or the direct method, we can collect both use value and non-use value based on that hypothetical market. So that is the difference between this direct and indirect method. So in the case of hedonic pricing method, if we can complete that hedonic pricing method, we collect the data related to the actual willingness to pay, and we also collect the data related to the different characteristics or the characteristics influencing the willingness to pay of the particular individual or influence the particular individual. The condition is that at least one or more characteristics should be related to the environmental values or environmental attributes. Maybe it's the weather conditions, scenic beauty, air quality, water quality, etc. Then based on that, we develop a demand function, that is the actual, the price of the house is a function of different characteristics, say site characteristics, then one set related to environmental characteristics and others related to maybe neighborhood characteristics, etc. Based on that estimated demand or the willingness to pay, we can develop the demand function, and from that we can reach the conclusion how that willingness to pay. So again, here the problem is that here one more step we can do. Here we indirectly calculate the one of the independent variables or a set of independent variables related to environmental related variables. So in order to know the implicit price, we can partially differentiate the willingness to pay with the environmental related variables. We can get the implicit price of the environmental related variables or set of environmental characteristics. So by partial differentiation, we will get the value of environmental characteristics. Again, here also there are limitations related to the hedonic property pricing method. The most widely criticized aspects is that there are the presence of multi-collinearity. Maybe sometimes people are not able to distinguish between site characteristics and the environmental related variables. Maybe environmental related variables also influence the site related characteristics. So there is the problem of multi-collinearity, and in sometimes there are other problems or other issues related to the actual revelation of or the actual situation related to the values, particularly in developing countries. It is very difficult to calculate the actual amount paid for the particular transaction. In the developed countries, we can collect it from the registration office or the like that.
Ma'am, our next question is from Jay Street. Can you please explain normative environmental economics?
Normative environmental economics. See, usually in microeconomics we use positive economics and normative economics. Here we extended the concept of the conventional concept of positive and normative economics to the environmental aspects also. As usual usual, it is very difficult to measure the normative environmental economies compared to the conventional microeconomics case or other firms' production cases, etc. So in the normative economies, we based on the present situation or the present by analyzing the present condition and also the future level or future aspects, we tried to prescribe or try to develop the conditions for what should be. So the difficulties related to this type of normative analysis in environmental economics is that, see, for example, in the case of sustainable development concept, see, the basic definition we use, the idea of the basic definition is that we use the particular resources without disturbing the future consumption. But we do not know what is the level of future consumption or what is the preference of future preference, etc. Even in the case of natural resources, whether in future, whether people substitute that natural resources with any other thing or like that. So normative environmental economics means actually we try to prescribe or we try to optimize or we try to develop policies or conditions for the future situation, or what ought to be the future level, or what ought to be the condition for the natural resources. That's the idea behind the normative environmental economics. But as usual, it is very difficult. But there are a lot of tools are existing, like discounted method, benefit cost analysis, etc. But still, it is very difficult to calculate the benefit of natural resources because maybe its benefit may go for long years. Again, in the case of particular context, we can't calculate the benefit in a local context. Sometimes the benefit in the local situation or local area may extend to the other areas or to a global level. Whether it is positive or negative, it extend to other areas also.
Okay, ma'am. What is the difference between approaches of environmental economists and regular economists? Taking an example of COVID-19 pandemic.
In the environmental economics, or in the particularly in the case of ecological economists, there are, if we go through the present condition in the pure environmental or ecological principle, maybe you have heard about the concept of degrowth, etc. If we analyze the particular situation in that way, maybe it's not a pure example, I am not saying like that, but still we can see some elements of degrowth in the present condition. Degrowth means without the development or without any progress, based on the present, without any changes in the whole economic system, the quality of the environment improving. So maybe you have heard about the current situation. All papers and newspapers and by global associations are reporting. They reported that the quality of air or quality of water are improving during the COVID-19 period or the lockdown period. So in that sense, if we analyze it with the concept of degrowth, without any change in the development, there is some improvement in the quality of natural resources or the quality of the environment. In that sense, we can say that, okay, there is an improvement in the environmental quality. But in the sustainability concept, we are not demanding such a situation. In the case of sustainability, we try to manage environment development, and the whole conservation or the whole development. So if there is a balance among the three, if there is an improvement, how we measure the progress, if there is a balance among the three, then only we say that it's an improvement. So if we assess the sustainability, the current situation in the context of sustainability, it's not a case of sustainability. But in the case, if you go deep and deep into the degrowth principle, maybe we can see some elements of environmental quality improvement. So in that sense, we can say that, okay, there are traces of improvement in the environmental quality. But even in the conventional economies or regular economies, we treated the development, the changes in the development or the improvement in the development or the economic system the same way. Environmental economists also consider the sustainability aspects. That means we need to improve the whole system. That means balance among the ecology, economy, and society. So if we if we can keep that balance, then we can say that is an improvement.
Can we include sustainable development goals while answering this topic?
Which topic? COVID-19?
Yeah.
Okay. See, sustainable development goals are, you all are aware about the sustainable development goals, 17 sustainable development goals. So in that 17 sustainable goals, one is related to the poverty. There are poverty related variables, health related variables, environmental related variables. Almost around 2 are related to water resource. One is related, I think, Sustainable Development Goal 6 is related to water resources. Again, one is related to life below water, etc. See, when we analyze the Sustainable Development Goals, see, one is if we analyze the healthcare system with the COVID-19 situation. See, the sustainable management of the resources or the healthcare system demand universalization of healthcare. So, if we analyze that universal healthcare concept, in the context of COVID-19, we have heard about a lot of situations the people are dying without medicines or without healthcare facilities. So that all things are against the universal healthcare system or healthcare management system. So in that sense, we can say that it's against the situation. Then again, people argue that we classify the different zones into green zone, yellow zone, etc. But in order to improve the economic situation, I read an article written by Beena Agarwal. She told that we need a situation of green workers. That means with the lockdown or with the quarantine, there are a lot of people suffering. We have a lot of people without any diseases or any symptoms. So we can use that laborers by creating some form of green zones. So that green zone is not the current one, but we can create some form of green workers, and we can give opportunity to work to that people in a quarantine form or in a segregated manner, so that we can improve the current economic situation. So if we do such measures, we can protect the sustainable development goals, or we can achieve the sustainable development goals, even though we are going through this type of pandemic. See, I have one more sentence. You can see there are different other indirect methods, travel cost method, preventive expenditure methods, etc. All these are available in the book written by Hanley, and also you can also refer the book of Tom Tietenberg, and other resources are also available in online, or you can also search in Google. So the conclusion is that even though we value a particular resources and we assign price for the natural resources, we assigning price for a particular resources, it is not for marketing, It is only to know the actual level, actual quality, and it is for the policy making and not for marketing. Maybe if it is needed, then we can use it for marketing. Otherwise, we are not suggesting for marketing for the natural resources, but it's for better decision making or the effective planning purpose. So we need to consider the philosophical and ethical approach, and also we should leave our ego or group ego while deciding or while making decisions. We consider the whole system as a single unit, that's the planet. We should protect the whole earth or the earth system. That's the idea of ecological economics, or that is the ultimate objective of the environmental economics. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful session, ma'am. It's really helpful for the students.
Okay,
All
thank
the
you.
participants, ma'am, thank you.